All right. I am here with Jill Faherty Lloyd, and she is a private wealth advisor. How's it going, Jill?
I'm great, Steve. Thanks so much for having me. It's really fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited to unpack your background and everything like that. But before we get into that, part of the reason that we wanted to talk was there's a topic not many people discuss around what happens after an exit with wealth and everything, involved after the fact. So to kick this off, let's go into your background. What got you into business and entrepreneurship?
Mm. Well, I grew up in a very big family. My grandfather and my father were both bankers. In fact, my father had his own investment bank, and he gave Henry Kravis and Teddy Forsman their first jobs on Wall Street. So the kings of private equity, right? And as I was growing up, I loved going to the office with him and ultimately wanted to follow in his footsteps. So off I went and cut my teeth at Bear Stearns on the institutional equity sales floor. Very, very few women, like maybe four of us out of 250 guys. And then after about 10 years, I went on to the asset management business. And then I went in to help run a hedge fund where there were even fewer women. Um, and after a while, I left the business to both raise my family, but I became an entrepreneur. I sold my business and then I ran a foundation for a number of years. And when my daughter turned to me and said that she wanted to go to boarding school, which nearly killed me, and it coincided with me reading a fascinating book called The Power of the Purse, which was written by Andrea Turner Moffat. And it outlined what is this coming enormous wealth transfer, not just generationally, but from men in favor of women. And it was projected that by the year 2030, that women would own up to two-thirds of our nation's wealth. So I thought, oh my God, like women are going to end up with all the money. What is that world going to look like? How could it change? And so I decided there was a business opportunity here and I put together a plan. I interviewed and did focus groups with dozens of ultra high net worth women to ask them what are you engaging with your wealth management firm with? And I learned that many of them were not engaging at all,
Mhm.
that they were abdicating to their partners or their spouses. And
Mhm.
so I came up with a business plan to help, really focus on this growth in the industry that would encourage more women and get them more comfortable in having agency with their capital. So I ended up pitching most of the major wealth management firms in New York. This is about 10 years ago. And one by one, I said, here's the great growth opportunity in wealth management. One by one, they looked at me and said, that is so sweet. Yeah, no, we don't do it like that. We treat everybody the same, but you'll be great. Go sit with Tom, Dick, and Harry, and you can be the token female on the desk. And I just thought that's not enough to get me out of bed in the morning. And so I doubled down and I ended up joining another firm and I built out their women's wealth platform. And about 3 years ago, I got a call from a recruiter from UBS. And to UBS's credit, they've been ahead of the game. They got the memo on the wealth transfer, and they've been ahead of the game on doing proprietary research around their client base. And the recruiter said to me, he goes, "Oh my God, like finding you a female advisor focused exclusively on women, it's like finding a unicorn."
Mhm.
I'm not saying you can write your own ticket, but you can write your own ticket. What do you want? What do you want to come here? And
Mhm.
so I happily joined UBS, and I couldn't be happier.
Nice. And what do you think one of the big drivers is going to be of the wealth transfer? Is it like driving women entrepreneurs? Is that a specific kind of driver that you're kind of seeing? Is that sort of how we're going to see this big transition?
Well, today more women have college degrees than men. 62% of undergraduate degrees are granted to women, and 64% of postgraduate degrees are granted to women. So they're highly educated. Women are more educated today than ever. They're getting more of the white collar jobs. Yes, we still have that pesky wage gap, but women are generating their own wealth, and it can be through building their own businesses. Also, women are inheriting wealth at an unprecedented rate, not only from their parents who are dying, but through divorce and through the death of the spouse. So it's coming from multiple places. But for me specifically, I am focused on working with female entrepreneurs to help them grow their businesses so that they can exit tax efficiently and then go on and do what it is that they want to do with the rest of their lives.
Nice, very nice. And before we get into Project Eco, what kind of things, real quickly, can women listening to this understand around being prepared from a wealth management perspective before an exit? Just some quick bullet points, because there's so many moving parts to getting prepared for a liquidity event. But are there any like quick tips that you can give people listening to this around the prepared aspect?
Of course. But first of all, I want to acknowledge I understand how overwhelmed female entrepreneurs are, right? Not only are they trying to grow their businesses, grow their revenues, manage their employees, they're also, managing their own careers. They're in many cases managing their husband's careers. They're, you know, in charge of the kids' schools, their social lives, their philanthropic lives. There's not enough hours in the day to do what is required of a female founder. So I understand the fact that a lot of women wait until after the business is sold in order to pay attention to it. But the biggest tip that I can give is to pay attention to build your personal team at least a year in advance of an exit because you need time to set up the vehicles to help you exit tax efficiently.
Hmm.
That's the
Yeah,
biggest tip I can give.
I
Build your
like that.
team.
I like that. The personal team is
Yeah.
a real key piece. Not referring to necessarily the internal team at your business, but the personal team that can help you navigate the liquidity event. That's, no conflicts of interest or anything like that. They're just there to help you as a person go through it.
Exactly. And the point being, you know, there when that deal is happening, there is a lot of noise, right? You can be getting retraded. If you've been able to sit down with a private wealth advisor and build a cash flow plan of what you want your life to look like. Let's set your goals. Okay, I want to have two homes and I want to put my kids through college and I want to leave them some money and I want to have X $100,000 a year to live mortgage free. Okay, well then what value do you need to extract from your business in order to make work optional?
Hmm.
And then once you've done that cash flow analysis, you can change the valuation of the business, right? It's worth $80 million. It's worth $100 million. It's worth $200 million. You've already built the model. So when you get an offer and you're in the transaction, you can make decisions much easier about what the value of your business is and what you need to extract.
Hmm. And I would say that a big problem or a disconnect is because it's beautifully said where you can basically design how to maximize your dream life out of a liquidity event like something like that. And I think a disconnect is a lot around confidence where people feel like, all right, if I never want to work as optional, which I really like that you said that. I want work to be optional. I want two homes. I want to be able to make this amount per year. I feel like backing into certain valuations is always a very like confidence driven thing. So when it comes to valuation in your experience, what types of moves have you seen people make with, being able to design their own lives and doing these valuations? And then we can start getting into Project Eco because I know that there's a ton there with the help that you've provided.
When I meet with a client, and hopefully it's a year or two before they're ready to exit or have a liquidity event. What my team and I do is we sit down and for at least an hour and a half, maybe two, and ask, I don't know, 100 questions, things that people are shocked that we're asking about. Do you have a dog? Are you religious? What do you care about? Who's important to you? What are your values? What was your greatest accomplishment? So the goal there is to truly understand what drives that human being. Values are values. There's no judgment. Somebody might want to spend all of the money that they make and leave nothing for their kids because they want to motivate their children. Other people may want to leave a slush fund, but no judgment. Somebody might want to have $10 million a year to live off of and not touch the corpus, and other people may, want to save more. So the the most important thing in order to build confidence for these founders is to let them know that you truly understand them
Mm,
and have them say out loud what it is that's important to them. And then what we'll do is we'll play it back in like a mind map. And it's this 5-page uh, uh, map of what's important to them, who's important to them, who are their advisors, how do they work with their advisors, so that they get the sense that they're heard. And then once they feel as if they're heard, those ideas that felt like pie in the sky that I could sell my business for $100 million, you start to chip away at the things that kept you from achieving those goals. We all know that you have to measure what you treasure, right? In
mhm,
order for things to come true, if you keep them in your head, it's very difficult for you to manifest. But if you start to put them on paper and you start to talk with people about the vision of your life, then you can really make that happen.
mm. Yeah, I like that. I like that because the visualization is so key, but actually writing it down is such a good tip. I really like that. A mind map. I haven't heard that term before. A
Yeah,
mind.
and you know what? Your goals can change. That's perfectly fine. And the valuations can
Hmm.
change.
Hmm.
But once you've sat down, you understand what people want, you figure out what that lifestyle is going to cost them, then you can back into the amount of money that they need invested in the market to support that lifestyle.
Hmm.
And that is really for freeing to understand that. There's no more guessing, right? You can
Hmm.
make very solid decisions when you understand it from a numbers perspective.
Yeah, and it aligns very well with the ramp up to the event because afterwards, everyone that I've talked to over the last few years, it's a complete emotional roller coaster after the fact, and you're going from, you know, cash flowing employment at a business you've built all the way to just a hard train stop of, a big lump sum in many cases, or even an earnout or something like that. But I think
There's a
it,
statistic out of the Exit Institute that said that 70% of entrepreneurs regret selling their businesses
yeah.
2 years afterwards. And the reason is that they didn't spend the time to think about what's next,
Hmm.
right? What is my a legacy? What do I want to accomplish when work is optional?
Yeah.
What am I interested in? What are the charitable endeavors? What changes do I want to make on this earth? When you spend the time thinking about that in advance, you're not as lost when
Hmm.
you're no longer tethered to your
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, well said. I like that. The mind map is like um, a forced plan for yourself after the fact that you can rely on, and especially if you've written it down too, like you said, calling back to that when things get pretty wild afterwards. I really, really appreciate that. So let's talk about Project Echo. What type uh, of resources do you guys have for women entrepreneurs out there?
Well, Project Echo was this idea in my head that I'd been trying to manifest over the last several years because I understand that female entrepreneurs are a driving force for change in this country. And so I founded Project Echo to address the funding gap and the lack of systemic support for female founders. So Project Echo is a community of like-minded women and allies who are all working together to elevate and energize the female entrepreneur community to help them develop their companies and help them uh, increase their personal wealth. That's a mouthful, but we're all aware of the funding gap.
Hmm.
And I'm sure your female listeners are painfully know this, that only 2% of venture capital goes to women and even less goes to women of color, despite the fact that female founded startups generate higher ROI, and higher revenue per dollar invested. So they're really great at doing more with less. So the question is, why are they not getting funded? And the venture-backed companies, right? The venture industry is dominated by men. 95% of venture partners are men. 70% of those are white men. And only 12% of decision makers in venture firms are women. So we can run into this sort of like me effect, right? That cognitive bias that it's our tendency, it's human nature to like people who look and think like us. So the consequence of that, of course, is you may overvalue people who are like you, and you might undervalue people who are not like you. So if the venture industry is really dominated by men, how can we provide support for female entrepreneurs?
Mhm.
So when I joined UBS, I saw immediately how many resources there were that could support this community. And I have ADHD. I'm a proud ADHD person. My brain works and I connect dots very, very easily. And I saw these different opportunities and I've created this ecosystem. And so it depends upon the stage and the industry that a founder is in and what type of help that they need. But for early stage companies, we have incubators and awards programs specifically designed to support mentorship and capital raising for early stage female run businesses. For fintech and enterprise tech companies, UBS Next, which is our venture arm and our internal innovation lab, is a great place to take fintech founders who have a business that might support UBS, and we will be happy to provide feedback on their pitch. I have had some of my clients actually get contracts with the firm, and also there's the potential of a venture investment from them. There's a number of different peer-to-peer networks. I run salons and events all year round where I bring female founders together. Of course, we have the UBS Investment Bank. That's for larger companies. But I think the most interesting thing and relevant to the Exit podcast is this interesting business that UBS has called the One Bank. To just back up, UBS is the largest wealth manager in the world, and we bank 50% of the world's billionaires. We know intimately that most people do not get rich by owning stocks and bonds. They got rich owning businesses. That's what Henry Kravitz and Teddy Forsman knew decades ago, right? But not every business is a billion-dollar business that UBS's investment bank can help. So what happens to that $100 million business that's owned by a female founder if I can't help her with the UBS investment bank? So we created this business called One Bank, which has 25 fully vetted boutique investment banks who are available to help our clients raise equity capital, raise debt, or do M&A transactions. That is game changing for a female entrepreneur because we know that the average exit is $100 million for a venture backed business. A female entrepreneur is exiting at a lower number than that. So, how can she find a banker who can either help her raise her Series B or help her sell the business? And so I can run a process for those founders to help them meet the right bankers, and then they can go from there. And this has been probably the most interesting part of Project Echo to date.
Nice. Yeah, and I've talked to so many different women about that gap, the venture capital, huge, ridiculous kind of gap that's going on. And I think that there's so many different solutions that have been floated around. A lot of amazing women like yourself that are actively trying to chip away and push to get that number higher. And I think resources and education play into it in a major way, like a major way that these resources and tools and financial instruments are available. I think that a lot of people don't really realize what is available, how to use it, and education isn't there. So it's a little bit scary when we bring up things like venture debt and things like that. People just kind of, necessarily steer clear of learning about it. because
Mm.
they're a little bit it's an unknown. And I think that it's really great that you're working towards helping with that. But what types of things could you share around financial education, like for empowering women and everyone listening to this to make a little bit more formed decisions when it comes to these liquidity events and exits?
Yeah. I think the most important thing for women to do and to do without shame is to talk about money. I know that sounds really simple, but the mere fact that women control the household budgets and they're comfortable, solving for the pain points of their family by buying things, and they're okay sharing what it costs to hire the pediatrician or the massage therapist or whatever it is, but is to really get them to talk about their money, talk about how much money they make, talk about the types of things that they're invested in, the types of returns. So it's to normalize that, to destigmatize that. The other thing I would say is that your biggest, in my opinion, any businesswoman's biggest asset is her network. And it is learning how to build that network because that network will support you and come back in spades.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes that word networking uh, for certain people has an ick factor, right? Ooh, I got to go to an event. I got to get a certain number of business cards and, you know, it feels awful. But there's a fabulous book by a friend of mine called Pat Headley. It's called Meet 100 People. And the idea is if you want to achieve something, if you want a new job, if you want an investor, if you want to sell your business, you're going to have to meet 100 people in order for that to happen. Because the first person you go to, especially for a female founder, is not going to say yes. But they might introduce you to the next person. And the next person you meet may not say yes, but they'll introduce you to the next person. So it becomes these circles outside of what it is that you're asking for.
Mhm.
And every time you meet somebody new, you learn something new. You become more interesting. You become more educated. And ultimately, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that you have achieved this thing. So I really spend a lot of time talking about women about building their network. It's a huge asset. And for some of us who are older and who have been in the game for a long time, it can be a one-way street, right? A lot of times it's just people coming and picking your brain. Can I pick your brain? Can I pick your brain? And I definitely do it. I do it all the time. I have Friday, office hours. Um, but at some point, and you have to remember this yourself, is that you've got to give it back. You got to pay it forward. You got to pay it
Mhm.
forward again, right?
Mhm.
Because otherwise, nobody's going to take your call. So normalize talking about money. Normalize your build your network. This is what men have been doing for millennia. Women need to be comfortable in that space.
Mhm. Yeah, and you providing, like you said, salons and dinners and meetups and everything like that, events are crucial for that.
Yeah,
So,
these women get together. We talk about things that are relevant, right? I might have a founder who will come in and say, talk about this is what I wish somebody told me that I didn't know,
mhm.
right? Or we'll talk about raising capital that's aligned with your values.
Mhm. Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's actionable. The women walk away from these events having learned something, having created relationships, sharing business cards, doing business together. I'll put founders together with funders. That's always really fun when you see the magic that happens in those rooms.
Yeah. Yeah, and those types of events for everybody listening are so fundamental for entrepreneurs at any stage, because just being around people who share similar problems that you have, that everyone around you on a daily basis probably don't share those problems as a founder or a CEO, and it can feel lonely, like completely lonely. And being around others who can comfortably talk about these problems openly, you will feel like light bulbs going off when that happens, because you're like, wow, I didn't even know that other people had these, problems with their follow-ups on hiring and raising money at this stage and sending term sheets and all that stuff. So it's such a great aspect that you have. So that leads us to the finale. Knowing what you know now, what
Oh
would you
God.
tell Jill 10 years ago?
I would tell Jill that she should have been more diligent on her personal planning. And I don't like to should on myself. I love to encourage myself. I don't want to should on anyone, but there isn't I can't say enough about building your work optional plan and building it early because, you know, having the opportunity to go just bug off and travel with your kids because you sell your business, people are exhausted. The vast majority of my clients are like, okay, I'm just gonna go like do nothing for 3 years and travel. um, but that having that ability to say, okay, here is what I need to support my lifestyle while I'm alive. Here is my legacy money for my kids and the things I care about, and here is my risk on money. And my risk on money, I personally want to fund more female entrepreneurs. And I personally want to get more capital in the hands of female VCs, right? So I probably should have started even earlier on my plan as a female funder of female run businesses.
Well said. Well said. Well, those are all the questions that I have for you, Jill. Where can people go and learn more about what you're working on?
So you can go to Jill Faherty Lloyd at LinkedIn, and please feel free to DM me there. I post often. I write a newsletter called the F3 Female Forward Finance. Comes out about once a month, where I talk about my musings of what I'm seeing in the space of women and money. So please join me.
Awesome. Well, wherever you guys are listening on iTunes or Spotify, the links that Jill mentioned will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that wisdom.
Thank you, Steve.